I want to talk about sacred cows. I know I do a lot of videos, and I'm assuming that you're spending all day watching them because that's what would be right? I don't know. What can I say? I make a lot of videos. The sacred cow that you're holding on to, you need to let the sacred cow. What's this phrase? It's smashing the sacred cows. I don't know. The sacred cow is that idea or ideology or doctrinal view that you have spent some time on and now you're treasuring it more than you treasure Christ. You don't know that you're treasuring something more than Christ. And the deceptive factor is that it's spiritual and biblical sounding, so you feel like it's right. And so you feel like you're justified in clinging to that thing. And you think it's related to Christ, but it's not Christ himself. And when somebody comes and wants to smash that sacred cow, you can figure out if you're holding on to a sacred cow or something other than Christ by your reaction. Do you feel defensive and offended? That is what we're seeing with many of the doctrines that are being exposed right now. The reaction from people who are entangled with them is to be offended, and that will become a hardening that will harden your heart, and what you thought was going to bring you to Christ will end up driving you away from him. And this is why whenever we Watchmen used an example. When we come to the Word, we always have to be fresh. We have to be as children. We have to say, I'm not sure. I don't know if my view is correct, so I need to suspend it and then let the Word speak to me and correct me. And it's hard to do that. It's very hard. And Watchman Nee talked about a basket being dipped in water, and the reed baskets didn't hold the water. The water flowed through them and washed them. And we tend to accumulate things, trying to hold all these hard objects in the basket. But the point of being in the Word is to let the water of the Word wash you and pour through you, not to hold on to something. And what many of us want to do is accumulate doctrinal knowledge rather than seeing the Word fresh. There is something of truth that gets built into you that becomes your constitution when you just come to the Word and let the Word wash you. But you almost don't even realize you're building it, or it's being built. I should say it's being built because God's the one building it. Like, that it's not that, we are so academically oriented that we think, once I study this topic, then I'll have the knowledge about that topic. That's not really the way it works. The way the Lord works with biblical knowledge is here a little, there a little, line upon line, precept upon precept. There is a difference between what you just learned with your mind and what the Lord reveals in your spirit, and then confirms again and again and again in the Word until you have all kinds of language to articulate that which you've seen with your spirit. That is firm, and that is something Christ has given you that no one can take away. And that comes, yes, we study the Word, but we just need to be careful to let the Word be a washing to us, and it should produce softness and a openness to the Lord, not a hard, calcified digging in on some point, And this really is difficult. I'm speaking to myself too, but because even the things that are right can become a veil to you, to keep you. Once they become part of yourself and your identity, where now when somebody touches it, you get offended. You've personalized it, And it's no longer something to do strictly with something Christ has given you, but it's something you've built up in yourself, in your flesh. And then it can be difficult to discern and see when you have a true doctrine that is lodged in your flesh and has become a part of your identity, then the enemy can use that to attract false nuances that you also hold because you're veiled. And so now while you're veiled, you're like the poop attracting the flies, to use the enemy starts coming with untruth and mingling it with that true thing you're holding it on to. So then later, it'll be that much more difficult to separate the falsehood from the truth without losing the truth. Does that make sense? And, when I got in this cult, that was very much a matter of my identity. I had seen some precious things in the Lord through a ministry of Witness Lee, but there was a lot of leaven. And the way the leaven got in, at first I rejected the leaven and held fast to that which was good. But that which is good became something of an identity for me because I saw something unique that other people hadn't seen, and that made me special. And I was going to go join this special group of people that had seen this truth, and we were the specialists of the special, Well, then I'm in darkness, and so then the leaven came back and mingled itself with that truth to where I couldn't it all brought me into bondage, and I couldn't discern the truth between the truth and the error. And when I got out of the cult, I had to stop reading the Bible altogether because I couldn't receive any light from anything because all the light was tangled up with darkness. And so Jesus said, when the light is in you is darkness, great is that darkness indeed, right? And so it took a long time for the Lord to finally bring me back. He untangled it all over a course of about 10 years of undoing the damage that had been done doctrinally and bringing me back to the Word again and again and again and again and again, until finally now I'm actually able to speak from the truth I initially received from that ministry without the leaven coming through, and I'm actually able to revisit that kind of truth in a pure way. But man, it took a long time. And while that untangling process was going on, I was miserable. I was not enjoying the Christian life the way we are supposed to. I didn't have the sense of the Spirit. I had grace, but it was like drinking grace through a Starbucks straw. It just a little tiny bit of reassurance would come through as God would lead me to truth doctrinally, but never the feelings of comfort and the witness of the Spirit. That was too clouded by all the other things that I had allowed to come through. And it was because I had allowed my knowledge of the truth to form an identity that I was willing to defend. And when you get in that, you're in the darkness. And then the enemy can just throw anything at you and you buy it all, And so that is what's happening. Like, for example, 3 Days of Darkness and some of these things we're seeing, or otherwise sound believers holding on to this thing and other things because somehow it came to them in a way that made it a special revelation, and they became part of the little group and the special people, and they didn't mean to do that, but now they're defending against their own interest. They're defending this thing, and it's hardening their heart and darkening them right before the Lord wants to pour out this season of refreshing on the soft-hearted church and use them. So, the sacred cows, in terms of one thing, like, your views of certain events that have to happen in order for the rapture to happen, Well, May 15th supposedly is the last day of, or is it 14th, of the 70 years for Israel. That is a well-developed doctrinal position that unfortunately I'm not sure that really, and someone brought it up to me in an email today, the fig tree generation the Lord talked about how this generation will not pass until all things are fulfilled. And he says, when the branch is green, you learn the parable of the fig tree, and he talks about the tenderness of the branch and the greenness of the branch. You see it shooting forth its roots, or shooting forth its branches. Then you know that the season is at hand. And it doesn't mean that the season is now. It means that the season is at hand. And what is that greenness? Right now, Israel is not renewed. Israel is still in a state of blindness and spiritually dead. But they will be renewed at the time of the sealing of the 144,000. That will be the beginning of their renewal. And that will be that event is actually associated with the fig tree, I believe, in Revelation. But then Jesus said that generation will not pass until all things fulfilled. And when you look at all things, you have to go back to Daniel 7 or Daniel 9, and it's talking about everything: the anointing of the most holy, the end of transgression, and the bringing into the kingdom. So to say that May 14th is the end of the fig tree generation doesn't make sense from that perspective. You're saying, well, it's 70 years and it can't go past 70, and then we'll have the rapture. We have to. It can't go. Well, what has to start at 70 years? See, that's like, it's just so dogmatic, and people are hanging their hat on it. And yeah, it's significant that we had the 70th year and all that stuff, but there's still 7 more years of stuff that needs to happen. And when does the generation start? See, we all assume that the generation started when physical Israel was brought back into the land in 1948. And that was a great sign. But is that the start? Maybe somebody can make the case that it is. But this is something that you need to look at and say maybe, but let the word wash you. Don't accumulate these things and then hold on to them. It'll produce disillusionment for you, and it could produce the anger and the defensiveness that I'm talking about, because now you see something that other people don't see, and as they try to, and it's become your identity. And you'll know if it's become your identity because you'll be offended if somebody tries to say something different, and then that very thing that you thought was the means by which you would know about the Lord's coming will actually harden you so that you're not ready. And that's kind of what happened to the Pharisees too. A lot of them knew the signs and were looking at the signs, and yet the Lord was right in front of them. Their heart was so hard because they were so puffed up of their knowledge. Knowledge puffs up. And I know this too well because the Lord has had to give me most of the things that have comforted me in environments where I'm being accused and persecuted from every direction and believing the accusations and labeled as false prophet and divisive and rebellious in church after church after church. And now I know that the reason he had to do it that way is so that I wouldn't be puffed up, about the things that I've seen, things for whatever reason in the Word that I just was attracted to things that other people weren't. And it seemed like things that weren't going to be even useful to anybody but to me. And now here I'm able to articulate and speak these things pretty clearly. And it's because I've been broken, and I'm not even fully broken. Don't think that I am not a mixture. I have pride. I'm not, until we see the Lord, we're always going to have the mixture in our flesh. And that's another admonition is don't wait until you're absolutely pure to serve the Lord, because that ain't going to happen. We can get to this idea where we bury our talent because we think the Lord is a hard master. And we are so introspective and waiting for that day when all of our motives are pure because we think he won't reward anything unless we are pure. No, what is pure, what is rewarded at the judgment seat is the fruit that remains. It's not a question of your motive when you produce the fruit. That's the sin that is not going to be referenced at the judgment seat because that was referenced at the cross. No, wood, hay, and stubble is things that you built up when you weren't even clear and you were not producing anything that remains. So carnal doctrines and legalism None of that. All that stuff's going to get burnt off, and nobody benefited from it. Nobody was fed by it. But anything of grace that was directly from the Lord, that you were able to help somebody else see, and that now became a writing in their heart that's shining in eternity. Or any person who was saved, or anyone who was refreshed in their inner man, that all is the building work of God that will be revealed in eternity in glory as a shining that will remain. And it is of incorruptible material, meaning it's of the imperishable resurrected life, and it's of the New Testament ministry which gives life, and therefore that will remain. The fire will test everything, and whatever passes through the fire and remains will bear fruit, even if you had a mix of motives while you were ministering that thing. Like Martin Luther said, the greatest hope I fear is the one in my own heart. And he was an obnoxious individual, and yet so many of us were helped because of something he ministered from his spirit about justification by faith that he saw in the Word that God revealed to him. And if he's there, he'll be rewarded for the fruit that remains from that ministry. And no, it's not that we don't deal with our motives. Trust me, we deal with our motives as we go. But we don't let our impure motives stop us from serving the Lord. If you see something, say it. Like the Homeland Security. If you see it, say it. Jesus said, what I whisper to you in secret, shout on the rooftop. Now, there is a time where God will deal with you, like he dealt with me. I wasn't able to really speak for the Lord for 20 years. But that doesn't mean that today I'm this pure vessel that, I still sometimes look at my stats and go, woo, I'm up to so-and-so subscribers. And, I'm a musician. I'm putting music videos up, or sometimes I do a Pastor so-and-so video just for entertainment, my own entertainment. And I love it when people like it and laugh and say things about it. And I read the comments and go, so that is all vanity. I admit that, but I still have to speak from the Lord. And I know that what is real is that the Lord has humbled me quite a bit and has brought me low so that he could raise me up. And as he's raised me up, I'm not necessarily this pure, perfect vessel. I'm not an angel. And yet I know that the blood covers me, and his righteousness covers me, and his discipline will deal with me. And so that makes me safe to minister, even though even though I've got these things that the Lord has to work out. And that's the difference between the one who thinks that he's a hard master and buries his talent, and the ones who realize it's all of grace, and so they go out and have increase even though they themselves are not perfect. So wow, this kind of wandered around. I hope it blesses you. I can't even summarize what I just said. I just been talking. Oh yeah, the word, let it be a washing and not an accumulation of goodies, and let the Lord strike the goodies out of your hand if necessary to give you the real thing. Take care.